Hi guys, my name's Ava, and today we're talking about being set apart. I don't know about you guys, but I hate having my shoes in the same place as my family. It gets all mixed up, and then when you're in a rush, you can't find your shoes, and then it's awful. I keep my shoes in my own room so they can be separate from everyone else's. Today's big idea is that when we follow God's way, it sets us apart. That basically means that we're separate for a specific reason. So let's take a look at today's God story to learn what it means to be set apart for God.
What kind of lights did Noah have on the ark? Floodlights. Hey everyone, it's Alyssa. I am so excited to be sharing a story with you today. So the other day, I was walking down the street with my friends. We were gonna go to a cafe and get some coffee and some treats. But as we were about to walk into the cafe, I noticed a lady sitting on the street, and she was clearly homeless and hungry and needing some help. And in that moment, I had a choice to make. I only had enough money for myself, or I could offer to help this lady out. And I decided to offer to buy her a meal. And in that moment, it was so cool to see how grateful she was and how I could make a difference in her life, even in this small moment. Later on, one of my friends came up to me and said, "Hey, I noticed what you did. Why did you do that?" And it was such a cool moment for me to be able to tell her about Jesus. Following Jesus isn't always easy. It's always good and it's always right. But sometimes it can be really difficult. But we have the Holy Spirit to give us some extra supernatural help, and thank goodness for that. And that leads me to today's big idea. When we follow God's way, it sets us apart. Last time, we learned that Adam and Eve had a third son named Seth, and through Seth's family line, we get to Noah. Noah was living a life close to God. In everything that he did, he showed that he loved God. This was very different from how everybody else in the world was living. Everyone else on earth had gotten more evil and more violent. We learn in Genesis 6 that as a result of the intense violence of the people of the world, God decided to save them from themselves. He said that he would send a flood to wipe everything and everyone off of the earth, except for Noah and his family. And with them, everything would start fresh and without violence. It might be hard to imagine why God would wipe everyone else away from the earth, but the world had become so violent and people were victims to this violence. So God was choosing to save them from the horrible things that were happening on earth. So God told Noah to build an ark, which is a really, really big boat that could hold his family and a lot of animals. God gave Noah special instructions on how to build this ark because, let's be real. Do you know how to build a boat that could hold a ton of animals and last through a ginormous flood? So Noah did exactly what God told him to do. He built this boat right down to the last detail, just like God said. And then Noah got the animals, a male and female of each kind, and his whole family, and got them into the ark. Everything happened just as God said, and Noah continued to do exactly as God told him. So Noah had built this boat nowhere near water, and it wasn't raining yet. And so imagine if you were one of Noah's neighbors. You must be thinking, this guy is crazy. It was definitely really strange, definitely different from everyone else on earth. And so here we are, Noah and his whole family, a whole zoo's worth of animals on this boat, and there's no rain. And after 7 days on board, the rains finally started, and it rained for 40 days. The waters covered everything, and the earth was flooded for 150 days. But through all of this, God watched over Noah's family. Because Noah followed God's way, he was set apart and taken care of. Let's read what happens next from Genesis 8. But God showed concern for Noah. He also showed concern for all the wild animals and livestock that were with Noah in the ark. So God sent a wind to sweep over the earth, and the waters began to go down. The springs at the bottom of the oceans had been closed. The windows of the sky had also been closed, and the rain had stopped falling from the sky. The water on the earth continued to go down. At the end of the 150 days, the water had gone down. After some time, Noah sent out a raven to see if there was any dry ground on earth. But the raven kept coming back because there was nowhere else to land. Then Noah sent out a dove, but the dove came back too, because again, there was nowhere else to land. But God had not forgotten them. He was going to take care of them. A week later, Noah sent out the dove again, and this time, the dove came back with a fresh leaf from an olive tree. So Noah waited another week and sent the dove out again. This time, the dove didn't come back, which means that there was a place for the dove to land and stay. Then God told Noah and all of Noah's family to get off the ark along with all of the animals, and that's what they did. God had kept them safe, and they were now out of the ark and ready to start fresh on earth. Noah had faith in God. He followed God's way and loved and respected God. Because of this, God set him apart as someone who was righteous. As people who follow Jesus and live God's way, we sometimes have to make difficult choices in order to honor God and show our love for him. And that brings us back to today's big idea. When we follow God's way, it sets us apart. I've had a blast today, guys, and I will catch you later.
Question time! Noah and his family and all of the animals were on the boat when it rained for a week, a month, 40 days, or 100 days. 40 days. To discover if there was dry land anywhere, Noah sent out a tiger, a shark, a pterodactyl, or a dove. A dove.
Game time! Running wild. Can you say the key verse before the runner wins the race? Get ready. 3, 2, 1, go! Say it with me. God, see what is in my heart. Help me live in the way that is always right. Psalm 139, verse 23 to 24. Noah and his family were set apart for God. Even when people thought he was crazy for building the ark, he stayed obedient to God and did what God showed him to do. I want to share with you a story from our friend Aaron and the time he realized what it practically means to be set apart for God. It's a cool story and we wanted to bring it to you in a super cool way, so check it out.
Hey there, my name is Aaron. I grew up in a small town in Canada in a great Christian community. One of my best Christian role models was my Aunt Libba, who lived and worked in Nepal. That's a country in Asia, right below China, and it's best known for Mount Everest. I'm sure you guys have heard of Mount Everest. My Aunt Libba was in charge of translating the New Testament into Maithili, one of the local languages. And the whole time I was growing up, she would tell me all these stories about Nepal. They were funny, interesting, it just sounded so cool. And then, one day in grade 10, she called me up and she asked me to come to Nepal. Of course! Finally, I was actually gonna see the places that she had told me about my whole life. I was beyond excited. And when I got to Nepal, I quickly found out things were very, very different from Canada, more than I could have imagined. The jungle and the mountains were literally 10 minutes away from the city. Some nights, I could literally hear monkeys howling while I was trying to sleep. First, we stayed in the capital city, Kathmandu, which was the busiest place I have ever been. It was like the buildings were packed into every single nook and cranny of the valley, and they used all the space they had. From the top of my apartment, I could see on every roof, people had built extra space for ping pong or for a kitchen or a garden, whatever. And don't get me started on the roads. There were no traffic lights or lanes at all. And even though I couldn't actually read the signs, I could tell nobody is obeying them. There are packs of stray dogs and deer that might chase you if you have any food, and a few other animals I had only ever seen in the Toronto Zoo. Whew. Now, normally, after a full day like that, in Canada, I would have a nice hot cup of tea. But in Nepal, they make tea called chai with lots of different spices like cinnamon and vanilla, and they serve it out of a giant pot with a ladle. And of course, I usually have toast with my tea. But there's no toast to be found in Kathmandu. Here, they make bread called naan in big dome-shaped ovens. And they sort of dive into the top and slap the dough on the inside of the oven. That was really cool to watch, but maybe a little too daring for me. At least there's one thing that is the same all over the world. Macaroni and cheese. You know the good stuff from a cardboard box? That is my absolute favorite. But then I found out that in Nepal, they only use powdered milk. I didn't even know that existed. But I started noticing the biggest differences when my aunt took me to her church. I was surprised to see that it was surrounded by these big walls and locked gates. She told me that people used to be put in jail just for talking about the Bible. So these churches had to be very careful and even meet in secret outside the city or behind walls. In fact, they could still get in trouble. But on Sundays, even though they were taking a risk, the churches opened their gates so anybody could come in. They would invite people who weren't welcomed anywhere else: the sick, the poor, and the outcasts. And at that time, there was a drought in Nepal, so many people were really struggling. There was already so much poverty, and now lots of people didn't have jobs, electricity, food, or places to stay. But even in those hard times, anybody who visited the church would get food, and I'll tell you, every Sunday that church was full and cheerful and loud, very loud. The last Sunday I was in Nepal, we ended church with prayer. All 200 or so people sitting on the ground, praying out loud for each other. And I couldn't quite understand it, but I knew the mightily words for thank you and God. And I kept hearing thank you, God, and just feeling the joy and love in that church. It was so impactful to hear that people in such difficult situations, all of them much more difficult than mine, were thanking and praising God. This awesome, loving community became a light for the whole area because they followed Jesus. They knew how to live out God's peace, and they were filled with His joy. Here in Nepal, I realized that no matter how much or how little we have, when we follow God, He can change how we experience life. And that sets us apart.
That was super cool. Thank you so much, Aaron, for helping us understand that even when life is hard, we can experience peace and joy because God is with us. That is a great reminder to take with us. Well, it's time to break out into small groups so we can see what this means in our own stories.